Tradition has it that this is the real Mount Sinai, and this is the location where the Hebrews came on the Exodus and where Moses received the Ten Commandments. And just to complete the story, they even have a golden calf here. You can see this rock shape here. Tradition has it that the golden calf was turned into stone, and there it is today. And they also have a Moses well, and what they claim to be the burning bush transplanted from the mountain. Thousands of tourists come here every year.
Come, my friend. You want chips? You want coca?
But is this the right location? After the Six-Day War in 1967, Israel gained control of the Sinai Peninsula. After that, bands of archaeologists came in and scoured this whole area, this whole region, for evidence that the Hebrews did camp here. And they found nothing. There was no evidence. Based on that, a lot of scholars say maybe the Exodus never happened. There's no evidence here. But are they looking in the wrong place? Has tradition got in the way of Bible truth? Josephus says Mount Sinai was the highest mountain in the area. Behind here is the traditional Mount Sinai, but actually that's not the highest peak in this area, so it doesn't qualify on that account. Now, 2 million people camping in an area for a couple of years would leave some evidence behind. Is there a mountain that has that evidence? We're here with Dr. Lennart Mölller, who I understand does DNA research. Is that right, Lennart?
Well, yes, that's not the only thing, but that's one part of my work in the laboratory. When you're a scientist, you look at things from a scientific point of view. And then it really doesn't matter if it's the Bible or you're in the lab or wherever. So my normal work is to look at DNA, but I also work with clinical application, drug development. Also, when we work with these nanostructures, if we have the Hebrews leaving Egypt, that is a very important story or history of the Hebrews. And it's detailed, very, very detailed in number of people involved and how they were walking and how they were transporting themselves. Then they are coming to a body of water. And there are not so many bodies of water to choose between. We have the Dead Sea, completely out of the question for many reasons. We have the Mediterranean Sea, it's not relevant either. We have a possibility with the left arm of the Red Sea. Possible. The Gulf of Aqaba is very, very deep. It's about 2,000 meters, or 6,000 feet, basically, in the deepest sections. And it's very, very shallow in the other arm, the Suez arm, so to speak. But the amount of water is not relevant. Because if water, according to the Bible, just stand as walls, the miracle, or whatever we should call it, is that there are walls of water. The height is not relevant. How it is, I have no explanation at all. I don't know how it works. I know that it's not a tsunami, because that's a totally different thing. And, that's not possible to compare with.
You can see how rugged these mountains are. And much of the Gulf of Aqaba is just as rugged underwater. So if God had parted the water with the underground terrain looking like this, it would have been impassable.
There are 2,000 meter high mountains around the Gulf of Aqaba. There are 2,000 meter deep waters in the deepest section. Huge falls from the peaks to the bottom. You can ask the question, how can we cross the seabed? I mean, we just take away the water. We don't talk about the water. But how can you just cross? First, you could not have any mud on the seabed. You need a solid ground. Horses should be able, full speed, going across that material, whatever the material is. In the middle of the Gulf of Aqaba, there is a shallow section, relatively speaking, shallow. And the interesting thing is that the downhill slope and then the uphill slope on the other side is within the criteria for wheelchairs in the US. You know, it can't be too much uphill or downhill with a wheelchair because it's too much work, so to speak. Yeah. So the downhill slope and the uphill slope is within these limits. That's a scientific statement.
This is the Wadi Watia. This is the canyon that connects the Sinai Desert to the Red Sea. And you can see these very rugged mountains. If you're walking down this canyon, you've got to follow it all the way. You can't go left or right. We find in Exodus chapter 14 verse 3 a description where Pharaoh would say the children of Israel are entangled in the land, the wilderness has shut them in. That's a perfect description of this wadi leading down to the Red Sea. Finally, after walking about 30 kilometres through this wadi, they come to the Red Sea. You can see behind us the Gulf of Aqaba, and behind that, the mountains of Midian. Josephus described the mountains around the Red Sea crossing site as impassable by reason of their roughness. You can see these mountains here around Nuweiba Beach are extremely rough. You can see the loose rock, the shingle, very hard to climb and very dry and barren. Had the Egyptians attacked the Hebrews at the Red Sea crossing site and they'd scattered through these mountains, it would have been an absolute disaster for the Israelites.
The interesting thing is that the gravel at the location in the midsection of the Gulf of Aqaba, since it's shallow there, the tidal current goes back and forth and keep this clean. And immediately when you take away the water, it's like concrete. It's very, very solid. So no problem with the horses, no problem with the chariots, no problems with the oxen and the oxen chariots and so forth. Just go across. And this is important because at the end of the southern part of the Gulf of Aqaba, it's very steep down. Basically, you fall down and you have to climb up. Of course, you cannot do that with chariots and horses and humans and whatever. And it is overloaded. It's like a rainforest, but corals that are so sharp, so you cut your hands and feet and whatever if you just get close to it. And it doesn't matter how wide it is there. It's more narrow. But you cannot, it's like Grand Canyon in the US. I mean, you fall down and you cannot climb up. And you have razor blades around. I mean, it's not possible. So we can exclude that possibility. Then, of course, one can speculate about the northern tip. So you just go into 1 meter of deep water. But that's a totally different thing. I mean, you can speculate over that, but you will never drown a horse in that amount of water. And why should you walk in the water if you have the beach beside you? I mean, it's, yeah. So this is a big story, and of course one could comment hundreds of things here, but something happened that was more than the ordinary. And from that, from different sources, we get information that the army disappeared. And we get information that the Hebrews were in the land of Midian.
Behind us we can see Nuweiba, more than 10 kilometres long and almost 5 kilometres wide. Large enough to hold the more than 2 million people that left Egypt. And here it was, where the Egyptian army caught up with them. To get a real sense of the height of the water in the Red Sea. We've come to the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. You can see here, this is the observation deck at 400 meters plus. The tower is 828 meters high. Where we're standing is just over halfway the height the water of the Red Sea would have been. You can imagine the Egyptians walking along the bottom of the Red Sea with walls of water 800 meters towering above them, and that water comes crashing in. We're talking walls of water the height of this building here. No wonder none of the Egyptians survived. On a number of trips we've brought metal detectors to Nueva, and these reveal that inside the coral there is metal that will be consistent with what we'd expect from finding remains of the Egyptian army. Now some people have asked, well, if that's the case, why don't you just bring up artifacts, some of this coral that contains this metal? There's a very simple reason for that. As you can see on the sign, it's strictly forbidden to touch or remove any coral in the Red Sea. So for us to do so would be violating Egyptian law.
Further south in the Gulf of Aqaba, you can see that things have been washed up on the land, like sea stars, corals, and other things twisted into one another, like a disastrous whatever. Like a washing machine has been treating the material, so to speak. And also in that kind of material we can find bronze. And bronze is a metal that's made by humans, so it's not a natural one. So something has happened in the Gulf of Aqaba where you wash up things on the sides, so to speak.
Across the Gulf of Aqaba, the Red Sea, we can see the mountains in Midian. Now Midian was the land that Moses fled to after he left Egypt when he'd killed the Egyptian. And it was while he was looking after Jethro's sheep in the land of Midian that he encountered the burning bush. And God said to him, it's to this mountain that you're going to bring the people.
The question with the land of Midian is important. The land of Midian in historical times were east of the Gulf of Aqaba. During the time of the Bible and the time of Jesus, it was east of the Gulf of Aqaba. Today is called the land of Midian. And the maps that we have behind me here that are 200-300 years old, they indicate that the land of Midian was in what we call today Saudi Arabia. Interestingly, when you talk to the Bedouins that have their oral traditions going back, one person said to me, he remembered, they expressed themselves like that, he remembered when their tribe was a Christian tribe, going 1600 years back in time. And the same person says that this land, the land of Midian, has always been the land of Midian. So they have a very strong history that they have as an oral tradition. And of course there might be mistakes and other things there, but still they have a tradition of this that goes far, far back. Again, if we look at the maps here, we can actually see that the living quarters of Jethro, the father-in-law to Moses, lived in that area.
So logically, where the Israelites went to on the Exodus following Moses was across there, over in the land of Saudi Arabia. A frequent question I get asked is why, if this is so clear and so obvious, and the evidence is there, why don't more people know about this? And why aren't archaeologists going over there and excavating these things? Well, there's a very simple reason for that. Midian is now in what's called Saudi Arabia today. A very difficult country to obtain an entry visa for. But we're going to go and talk to some people who have been there and look at their evidence.